Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The call came on December 19th, 6 days before Christmas, while I was standing in the cereal aisle of my local grocery store, comparing the nutritional labels on two boxes of granola like my life depended on it. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, and I answered without checking the screen because I was raised by a woman who believed ignoring phone calls was a moral failing. Eleanor. It was my sister-in-law, Patris. Her voice had that particular tightness to it, the sound of someone who has rehearsed a speech in the bathroom mirror 3 times and still isn't confident. "I'm calling about Christmas." "Okay," I said, setting both boxes of granola back on the shelf. "We've decided to keep it small this year, just immediate family." A pause. "You understand." I did understand, I understood perfectly. Immediate family meant my brother Gerald and his wife Patris, and their 3 adult children Marcus, Yvette, and the youngest Daniel, who at 31 still borrowed money from his parents and called it a loan. Immediate family meant my mother Dolores, who had been slowly rewriting history for the past decade until somehow I had become the villain in a story I thought I'd been living as a protagonist. Immediate family meant everyone except me. When did I stop being immediate family? I asked. "Make this dramatic, Aliner." "Not," I said, and I genuinely wasn't. I was surprised, but I wasn't dramatic. I was 54 years old. I had weathered worse than a disinvitation to a holiday dinner. "I just want to understand the reasoning." Patris sighed the way people sigh when they want you to know that your very existence is exhausting. "Mom feels that last Thanksgiving was tense." Last Thanksgiving had been tense because I had gently but clearly pointed out that Marcus had been introduced to a contact through my professional network, landed a consulting contract worth $40,000 and had not acknowledged it once, not with a thank you, not with a phone call, not with a text message containing a single emoji. I had not raised my voice. I had not thrown anything. I had simply said out loud and at a dinner table that I felt unappreciated. According to my family, this made me difficult. "All right," I said. "All right." Patris sounded suspicious, like she'd been expecting a fight and had already loaded her weapons. "All right," I repeated. "Merry Christmas, Patris." I hung up, put my phone back in my pocket, and stood in the cereal aisle for a long moment. Then I picked up the granola, both boxes, because it was the holidays and I deserved fiber, and I walked to the checkout line. What my family did not know, because I had not told them, was that 6 weeks earlier I had received a phone call of an entirely different nature. His name had been Reginald Ashworth. I say had been because Reginald died in October at the age of 89, having outlived 2 wives, 1 business partner, and what he described in the single conversation we'd shared as the better part of my patience with human beings. He was my mother's uncle, her father's brother, which made him my great-uncle, a category of relative so distant that I had met him exactly twice in my life. Once at a funeral when I was 11, and once at a family reunion when I was 26, where he had sat in a lawn chair at the edge of the festivities, drinking iced tea and watching everyone else with the expression of a scientist observing a colony of particularly unimpressive ants. I had sat with him that afternoon, not out of obligation but because I was 26 and going through a difficult period, and the lawn chair next to his was the only place at the reunion where no one was pretending to be happy. We talked for 2 hours. He asked me about my work. I was just beginning my career in commercial real estate appraisal. And he listened, actually listened, in the way that older people sometimes do when they've reached an age where performance has become too exhausting. He told me I had a good mind and that I shouldn't let people talk me out of using it. Then dinner was served and we went our separate ways, and I didn't see him again for 28 years. The phone call in October was from a lawyer named Patricia Osei, who had a calm, precise voice and the manner of someone who delivered unusual news for a living and had learned not to editorialize. She informed me that Reginald Ashworth had passed away, that I had been named in his will, and that she would like to schedule a time to discuss the details. The estate was valued at $4.5 million. I sat in my office for approximately 10 minutes after that call, staring at the framed appraisal certificate on my wall, which suddenly looked both more and less significant than it had that morning. Then I called Patricia Osei back and asked her to repeat the number because I needed to hear it again to believe it. It was the same number. Reginald had no children. His second wife, a woman named Constance who had apparently been the great love of his later life, had died 4 years earlier. His business partner had predeceased him. He had assets, property, investments, decades of carefully accumulated wealth from a construction business he'd built in the 1970s, and he had decided, for reasons he apparently explained at length in a personal letter attached to the will, to leave the majority of it to me. The letter said, among other things, that he had followed my career from a distance and found it admirable, that he had appreciated the afternoon we spent talking, that he believed I had done the work of becoming a full human being, which he considered the primary obligation of being alive, and that he had watched too many members of the family coast on the efforts of others without acknowledgement or gratitude. He named no one specifically. He didn't have to. He left smaller amounts to a few charitable organizations and a modest sum to my mother, which I thought was both gracious and a little funny. He left nothing to Gerald, nothing to Patris. Nothing to Marcus, Yvette, or Daniel. He left everything else to me. Patricia Ose advised me not to discuss the estate publicly until probate was complete. I took her advice. I told no one, not my friends, not my colleagues, not my mother, not my brother. I went about my December quietly, finished my client work before the holidays, wrapped the small gifts I was planning to give, and waited for the process to move forward. And then on December 19th, my sister-in-law called me from a grocery store aisle to tell me that I was no longer immediate family. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, which sounds melancholy but was actually peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. I made a rack of lamb because I had always wanted to make rack of lamb at Christmas, but had always deferred to the preferences of whoever was hosting. I opened a bottle of wine that cost $42, which by my family's standards was extravagance bordering on irresponsibility. I watched two films I'd been meaning to watch for a year. I went to bed at 10 o'clock and slept without dreaming. In early January, probate cleared. I did not call a press conference. I did not post anything on social media. I did not send my family a letter. What I did was something more quietly significant. I started living differently. I made calls. I moved money. I put a deposit on a property I had been circling for 3 years, a mid-century house with a wide porch and more land than I had ever owned, and I began the process of rebuilding my life around its actual dimensions rather than the cramped, apologetic shape I had allowed it to take. My mother found out in February. Gerald called me the same afternoon she did, which told me everything I needed to know about the telephone chain operating in my family. Eleanor. He used the same tone Patris had used in December, careful, measured, deployed for maximum effect. Mom mentioned something about Uncle Reg. She said he left you the estate. Did a pause. Gerald was a man who processed information slowly but thoroughly, like a machine that was not fast but was very thorough. That's quite something. I agreed. We didn't even know he had that kind of money. I said, I suppose you didn't. Another pause. Eleanor, about Christmas, Gerald. I kept my voice pleasant because I felt pleasant. I genuinely did not feel angry. I felt something cleaner than anger, the particular calm of a person who has been handed clarity they did not ask for. You don't need to do this. Just want you to know that things got a little. I know what things got, I said. And I want you to know that I don't carry any resentment about it. I genuinely don't. But I also want to be honest with you because I think honesty is something our family has been a little short on. The way I was treated last year and for several years before that is not something I'm willing to continue. Not at Christmas, not in general. He was quiet. Love you, I continued. You're my brother and I love you and I don't want to be estranged. But I'm not going to perform gratitude for being included when I've been made to feel like a burden. That's not how I want to spend whatever time I have left. Whatever time you make it sound like you're dying. 54, I said. We're all dying, Gerald. Some of us are just more honest about accounting for it. Marcus called in March. He wanted to talk about potentially reconnecting, which I recognized as the vocabulary of someone who has recently learned about a financial development and wants to position himself favorably in relation to it. I listened to him for 7 minutes. Then I told him that I had thought about our conversation at Thanksgiving many times, and that I didn't need an apology, but I did need him to understand that the professional favor I had done for him was not small and had not gone unnoticed by me, even if it had gone unacknowledged by him. He apologized. It was a real apology, halting, uncomfortable, without excuse-making, and I accepted it because I am not a person who requires people to grovel, and I did not become one simply because my circumstances had changed. What I did not do was offer him another professional introduction. That would come later, or it would not come at all, and it would be earned rather than assumed. Yvette sent a card. It was a nice card, handwritten, which I appreciated. My mother called every 2 weeks, and our conversations were careful at first, then gradually less so. She did not apologize explicitly for the Christmas exclusion. She was not built for explicit apologies, but she started asking about my house, about my work, about what I was doing with the land on the east side of the property, and I recognized this as her version of repair. It was enough. Patris never called. I did not wait for her to. There is a version of this story where I use the money as a weapon, where I buy something ostentatious and make sure everyone knows about it, or where I cut the family off entirely and let the silence speak. Some people would find that version satisfying. I understand the appeal, but revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself at the dinner table or post itself on the internet. Real revenge is the quiet act of refusing to remain small. Reginald Ashworth sat in a lawn chair at the edge of a family reunion in 1998 and talked to a 26-year-old woman who was struggling, and he decided she was worth his time. He watched her for 28 years from a distance. He decided at the end of his life that she had done the work. I think about that often. I think about what it means to be seen, not performed for, not managed, not carefully included or strategically excluded, but genuinely seen across decades by someone who had no obligation to pay attention. I bought the house. I planted things in the garden that won't reach their full size for years. I have a guest room that stays empty most of the time, and I've learned to like the sight of it, a room with potential, unhurried waiting for the right occasion. My family comes to visit sometimes. It's different now, and I won't pretend it's entirely comfortable, because the shape of a thing doesn't change overnight even when you want it to. But it's honest, and honestly has always been what I wanted more than anything, more than inclusion for its own sake, more than a seat at a table I'd been made to feel I was taking up too much space at. I set my own table now. There is room at it for people who know how to show up. And the granola, for what it's worth, turned out to be excellent.